The second I pulled into the driveway and spotted Jessica standing in my garage, holding a fistful of bills, I felt it, something was definitely off. She had that smug little smile she wears when she thinks she's outsmarted everyone, the kind that always makes my gut twist. "Susan," she called out, all chipper, waving the cash like it was a prize from a game show. "You're just in time, I've got fantastic news." I stepped out of my old Honda Civic, moving slow, eyes scanning the garage. Right away, I noticed what wasn't there. The spot where my project car usually sat was empty. Just a dark oil stain on the concrete and the faint scent of motor oil hanging in the air. I didn't really need to ask, but I did anyway. "Where's the Cobra?" I said, quietly. Jessica's grin grew wider. "Oh, that rusty old thing? I sold it for you. Got $3,000 cash, which, frankly, is probably more than that heap was worth. You needed something more sensible. Honestly, a grown woman your age driving some battered sports car from the 60s? It was just plain sad." For a moment, everything felt like it tilted sideways. I just stood there, staring at the space where my 1967 Shelby Cobra 427 used to be. This wasn't just any car, it was one of only 348 ever built. I'd bought it as a rusted-out frame and poured 4 years of sweat and soul into bringing it back to life. Every nut, every bolt, every bit of paint had passed through my hands. "You sold it," I said flatly, my voice calm even though my chest was a storm. "For your own good," she replied, brushing a perfectly curled strand of gray hair behind her ear. "Thomas thinks I did the right thing. You've been wasting so much time in here with your greasy car parts instead of doing something more appropriate. Maybe now you'll take up gardening. Or cooking." I stepped closer, watching how she clutched the cash to her chest like it was sacred. $3,000, I said, for a car that was just appraised at over $400,000? She blinked at me, still smiling. "I listed it on Craigslist. Some young man came by, seemed like a sweetheart. Said he'd been looking for a fixer-upper just like that one. I told him it needed work, but he was excited. I even gave him those fancy tools that were always cluttering up the place." My tools. The Snap-on collection that had belonged to my grandfather, a man who'd spent 3 decades building and racing cars. Tools worth more than most people's daily drivers. Tools I inherited when he passed, along with everything he knew and loved about restoring engines. "Jessica," I asked, keeping my tone even, "did you at least get any paperwork from the sale?" "Of course I did. I'm not an idiot," she said, fishing a wrinkled paper out of her purse. "Here's the bill of sale. It's all completely legal." I took the paper with steady hands, though my heart was pounding hard enough to crack ribs. One look and I knew how bad this was, scribbled on lined notebook paper, no title change, no ID, nothing official. "This guy you sold it to, did you get a name? A license? An address?" She waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "He paid in cash. That's what counts. Honestly, Susan, you should be grateful. Now you can put that money toward a nice, practical car. Something like a sedan." I folded the paper slowly and slid it into my pocket. "You know what, Jessica? You're right. Thank you for handling that for me." The look of confusion that crossed her face was almost satisfying. She had braced for a fight, maybe some yelling or tears. But I gave her what she wanted, calmness, maybe even appreciation. "Well," she said, a bit thrown off. "You're welcome, dear. I just want what's best for you. Thomas will be thrilled when he gets back from his trip." Thomas. My husband of 6 years. The same guy who gave his mom a key to our house for emergencies and never quite figured out how to tell her no. Thomas, who thought my car projects were cute, but would have preferred I spent my weekends getting manicures instead of rebuilding carburetors. "I'm sure he'll be thrilled," I said, pulling out my phone. "Jessica, could you hang out here for a minute? I've got to make a quick call." She nodded, too busy counting her prize money to notice the shift in my tone. "Take your time, sweetie. I'll straighten up the garage while you handle your business." I walked to the far corner of the garage, where the Wi-Fi signal was strongest, and dialed a number I'd memorized long ago. "Detective Martinez," I said, keeping my voice low, "this is Susan. I need to report a theft." "Susan? What happened?" "Lisa and I go way back, college roommates. While she was busting her tail in criminal justice, I was buried in mechanical engineering. She knew about my car, my reputation in the classic racing community, and exactly how valuable that Cobra was." "Someone sold my Cobra without my consent," I said, looking back at Jessica, who was now moving my remaining tools around like she had a clue what they were for. "The 67? The one I was prepping for Barrett Jackson." She let out a slow, sympathetic whistle. "Damn. Who pulled that stunt?" "My mother-in-law. She had access to the garage and thought she was doing me a favor by getting rid of my junk car. Sold it for $3,000. There was silence on the line for a second. $3,000 for a numbers matching 427 Cobra? Yup. Listed it as a fixer-upper on Craigslist. Wow. That might be the most painful screw-up in car history. What do you need from me?" "I've got a name and a barely legible signature from the bill of sale. Not much else. Can you run it and try to find out where the car ended up?" "Send me everything you've got," she said without hesitation. "I'll start digging. And Vic. I'm sorry. I know how much that car meant to you." I glanced over at Jessica. She was now attempting to organize my socket sets by color instead of size, like they were pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. "Thanks, Lisa. I'll send over what I've got." After we hung up, I quickly typed out the buyer's info, what little there was, and messaged it to her. Then I walked back over to Jessica, who was standing with her hands on her hips, looking around the garage like a queen surveying her new kingdom. "All taken care of," I said with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Why don't you head home? Thomas is back from Chicago tomorrow evening, and I'm sure he'll want to hear all about your big achievement." "Of course," she said, scooping up her purse and that wad of cash like she'd just closed a major business deal. She was practically glowing. "You'll see, dear, this really is for the best." Once she was gone, I stood in the middle of the garage, alone with the silence. I stared at the empty space where the Cobra had lived. 4 years. 4 years of my life poured into that machine. Hours spent tracking down rare parts, watching welding tutorials late at night, carefully rebuilding that 427 big block with nothing but patience and my hands. It wasn't just a car, it was my connection to my grandfather. Every screw, every spark, every layer of paint was a conversation with him. Jessica looked at it and saw junk. I looked at it and saw legacy. The next morning, Lisa called. "No small talk. The name on the bill of sale?" "Fake," she said flatly. "Daniel. The phone number's dead, and there's nobody by that name at the address." "Think we're dealing with a pro?" "Most likely. Someone who knows how to sniff out undervalued classics, posts fake info, pays in cash, and flips the car fast, either through shady dealers or underground auctions." I leaned back in my office chair, staring out the window of the engineering firm where I worked. The place was clean and quiet, nothing like my garage. So it's probably long gone. Maybe not. I've got a few people in the vintage car world I can reach out to. If a Shelby Cobra pops up out of nowhere, someone might notice. "Thanks, Lisa. I mean it. Just promise me that when you get your next build going, I get first ride." Later that afternoon, I was in a meeting, going over stress loads for a new bridge design, when my phone buzzed on the table. A text from Thomas. "Mom told me about the car. Probably for the best. Maybe now we can use the garage for storage like normal people." I stared at the screen for a long second, then turned the phone face down and gave my attention back to the meeting. Some talks needed to happen face to face. Thomas walked through the door the next evening in a whirlwind, rolling suitcase, loosened tie, and already halfway into a story before he even kissed me hello. "Vic, you should have seen their faces when I showed them the cost breakdown," client practically signed on the spot, he said, grinning like a kid who just scored a touchdown. That's great, I said from the kitchen, where I was stirring pasta sauce. How was the flight? Delayed, of course. But flying first class makes everything easier. He strolled into the kitchen and gave me an absent-minded kiss on the cheek. Mom told me about the car, he said. Honestly, I'm kind of relieved. That thing was turning into an obsession. I kept stirring, slow and steady. Is that really how you saw it? Oh come on, Vic. You spent every weekend out there. It was like being married to a mechanic. He chuckled, totally missing the tightness in my shoulders. Now we can finally use that space for something useful. Maybe set up a home gym. Get some real storage in there. I turned the heat down on the stove. Your mother sold my car without my permission, I said quietly. She was just trying to help. You know how she is, always thinking about what's best for the family. He pulled a beer from the fridge like this was just another Tuesday. And hey, $3,000 for something that old? Not bad. We could put that toward a vacation. I turned around to face him, taking a long look at the man I married. Thomas looked every bit the successful salesman, good posture, expensive watch, the polished confidence that had drawn me in all those years ago. But now, standing in our kitchen and brushing off everything I'd built like it was a yard sale item, he didn't look familiar at all. That car was worth $400,000, I said. He froze mid-sip. Wait, what? It was a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427. Numbers matching. One of only 348 ever made. I was restoring it for the Barrett-Jackson auction. His face turned white. You never told me it was worth that much. You never asked, I said. In 6 years of marriage, not once did you ask about the specs, the thermoset value, the history. You just joked about how I smelled like motor oil and rolled your eyes at the time I spent in the garage. He looked like he was trying to do the math in his head, his mouth half open. But, $3,000? Mom said it was just some old car you were tinkering with. Your mother committed theft. She sold something she didn't own, for a fraction of what it was worth, to a buyer who used fake information and vanished. He slowly set the beer down on the counter, his hand suddenly unsteady. Is there a way to get it back? I don't know, I said. The police are involved. But these kinds of buyers? They move fast. They use fake names and sell high-value classics under the table. It's a whole operation. He swallowed hard. Oh God. Oh God. What are we supposed to do? For the first time since I'd come home to find Jessica counting cash like she won the lottery, I smiled. Not a warm smile, not one of comfort, but something colder. Steadier. I said, aren't doing anything. I'm going to keep working with the police and try to get my car back. And you, I added, are going to have a very long, very uncomfortable conversation with your mother about boundaries, theft, and exactly what the legal consequences of her help might be. The next morning, everything changed with one phone call. I found your car, Lisa said, her voice buzzing with excitement. I was at work, just settling in, but as soon as I heard her tone, I closed my office door and sank into my chair. Where is it? Scottsdale. A private collector, name's Matthew, bought it from a dealer yesterday. Paid $250 for it. Somebody made a hell of a profit flipping your Cobra. $250,000? I repeated, stunned. It was worth $400 fully restored. Yeah. I'm guessing the dealer lowballed the price by claiming it still needed a lot of work. I rubbed my temple. Of course they did. But here's the silver lining, Morrison's the real deal. He's not some shady flipper trying to turn a quick buck. He's a serious collector, and when I told him what happened, he was shocked. He's ready to help however he can. What does that mean, exactly? It means we've got a clear paper trail. Morrison has proper documentation from the dealer. The dealer has info from your so-called Daniel. And we've got the bill of sale Jessica scribbled out. All of that adds up to a clean case of receiving stolen property. For the first time in days, I actually felt myself exhale. So we can get it back? We can get it back, she said, firm. Morrison's insurance is gonna cover his loss. The dealer's already cooperating because they don't want criminal charges on their record. Scottsdale PD is tracking the money trail now. How long are we talking? A few weeks, maybe. Just long enough to process the paperwork. But your car's been tagged as evidence, it's not going anywhere. That night, I called a family meeting. Thomas looked like he hadn't slept, sitting across the table looking worn out and pale. Jessica showed up late, of course, still carrying herself like she was the hero in this story. I really don't see the need for this whole production, she said with a dramatic sigh as she lowered herself into a chair. I already explained everything to Thomas. I sold that old car at a very fair price. Jessica, I said calmly, I need you to hear me clearly. That car you sold? It was worth $400,000. She blinked. That's ridiculous, Susan. It was just an old. It was a 1967 Shelby Cobra 427, I cut in. One of the rarest and most valuable muscle cars ever built. I spent the last 4 years restoring it to Concours-level condition. Her smug expression cracked, just slightly. That can't be true. It looked like a pile of junk. That's because you saw it mid-restoration. What you called junk was actually a painstakingly disassembled classic, every part being rebuilt or restored to factory specs. I picked up my tablet and opened the photo album I'd been keeping throughout the process. This is how it looked when I bought it. The first picture showed the shell of the Cobra, no engine, no seats, covered in rust, propped up on blocks inside a dusty old barn. Jessica squinted at it. See? Junk. I swiped to the next photo. After I media blasted the body and started the bodywork. The lines were clean. The primer coat was smooth. You could already see the shape coming back to life. Another swipe. This is the engine rebuild. My grandfather's tools on the bench. Every part of that 427 pulled apart, cleaned, measured, and reassembled by hand. With each image, her confidence faded. The interior, I continued. Leather seats, stitched by hand. The original gauges, taken apart, recalibrated, and reinstalled. The dash looked like it had just rolled off the line in 1967. Then came the final photo. And this, I said, turning the screen so she could see it full on, is what you sold for $3,000. The car gleamed. Chrome shining, paint flawless. It looked like it belonged in a museum. Jessica's face drained of all color. I didn't know. The guy who bought it from you wasn't some sweet kid looking for a fun weekend project, I said. He was a professional. A car thief. These people watch Craigslist for exactly this kind of situation, classic cars being sold by people who don't know their worth. Thomas's voice cracked. A thief? Fake name. Fake address. Police are still investigating, but I'm guessing this isn't his first time. He targets families in situations like this, estate sales, divorces, overstepping relatives. Jessica was staring down at the photos now, her hands trembling in her lap. $400,000, she whispered. That's what the car was worth. And it's been found, by the way, I added. A collector in Scottsdale bought it for $250,000. He's cooperating with the investigation. Jessica's eyes lit up, desperate. So, we can get it back? I can get it back, I said pointedly. But there's something else you need to understand. What you did wasn't just a mistake. It was theft. You sold property that didn't belong to you, and now the district attorney is reviewing your actions for criminal prosecution. The silence that followed was heavy. Jessica looked at Thomas, then back at me, then down at the tablet again. Criminal charges, she murmured. In this state, theft over $100,000 is a first-degree felony, I said. That carries a mandatory minimum of 2 years in prison. Thomas buried his face in his hands. Mom, what did you do? I was trying to help, Jessica said, but the strength in her voice was gone. She looked lost. I really thought it was just taking up space. No, I said quietly. You thought you knew better than I did. You decided my passion was silly. That it wasn't ladylike or appropriate. So you took matters into your own hands and tried to fix my life according to your rules. Jessica began to cry. Her mascara was smudging, black streaks running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I swear, I didn't mean to. I'll pay you back. I'll figure something out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. With what? You've got $3,000 in an envelope. That won't even cover a paint job on that car. Thomas looked up, voice shaking. We'll make it right. We can take out a loan or something. Thomas, I said, looking him square in the eye, you need to be very clear on this. Your mother committed a felony. She stole something worth more than most people's homes. And you don't fix a felony with an apology and a loan application. Over the next couple of weeks, while the investigation moved forward and the legal gears started turning, I noticed something unexpected. The way our family functioned, or didn't, began to shift. Thomas, now faced with the full weight of what his mother had done and what it cost, started seeing things a little differently. He'd spent years brushing off my interest in cars, playing along with Jessica's meddling because, frankly, it was easier than challenging the family dynamic he'd grown up with. But now? Now he had to reckon with the fact that the thing he used to call a hobby was actually a highly skilled craft, one that could be measured in 6 figures. One evening, as we sat quietly in the kitchen, Thomas finally broke the silence. I never really got it before, he said. I mean, I knew you were into cars, but I didn't understand how serious it was. I kept my eyes on the cutting board, calmly slicing vegetables for dinner. No, I said. You didn't want to understand. It was easier to dismiss it as some quirky little pastime than to admit I might actually be good at something you didn't understand. He didn't argue. The legal resolution came quicker than I thought it would. Lisa wasn't exaggerating, Morrison turned out to be everything she said. When he found out the Cobra had been stolen, he was horrified. Said he'd never keep a car under those circumstances, no matter how rare. The dealer who'd sold it to him agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Turns out, Daniel wasn't just a one-time crook. He was part of a larger ring targeting undervalued classics, estate sales, online listings, family disputes, any situation where people didn't know what they had. Jessica, when confronted with the possibility of felony charges and real jail time, ended up taking a plea deal. 5 years probation, restitution, and community service. She avoided prison, but nothing could fix what she'd broken. Thomas and I gave counseling a try, but it didn't take long to realize that this whole ordeal had simply pulled the curtain back on problems we'd been avoiding for years. He needed a wife who made sense in his carefully curated life, someone who wore heels, not coveralls. Someone who played her part without challenging the script. And me? I needed a partner who respected the things I loved, even if they weren't part of his world. 6 months after the Cobra was sold out from under me, Thomas and I finalized our divorce. No fireworks. No screaming. Just a quiet end to something that had quietly been unraveling for a long time. He kept the house, the one with the empty garage. I packed up my tools, the ones Jessica hadn't pawned off with the car, and found a small place outside the city. Nothing fancy. Just a cozy home with a 2-car garage and enough space for me to work. The Cobra came back to me in near-perfect shape. Morrison had taken care of it, kept it indoors, had his mechanic give it a full inspection just to make sure nothing had been damaged in transport. But as much as I appreciated having it back, something in me had shifted. The project didn't feel the same anymore. Too much had been lost. Too many memories attached to it now that weren't about joy or pride, but betrayal. So, I sold it. Properly this time, through Barrett Jackson, with full provenance and documentation. It brought in $420,000. With that money, I did something I never thought I'd get the chance to do. I bought a 1970 Plymouth Cuda. Had been sitting untouched in a barn for 3 decades. Not as rare as the Cobra, sure, but it meant more to me. My grandfather had one. It was the car he taught me to drive in. The car he used to let me pretend to steer when I was barely tall enough to see over the dash. This build wasn't for an auction. It wasn't for prestige. It was for me. These days, I spend my weekends in the garage with the doors wide open, music playing, and tools spread across the workbench exactly the way Grandpa taught me. The Cuda is still a work in progress, but it's coming together beautifully. Neighbors stop by sometimes to see what I'm working on. A few are surprised to see a woman turning the wrenches. Most just admire the craftsmanship. Thomas still sends me texts now and then, holidays, anniversaries, that sort of thing. He says he's seeing someone new. She appreciates the finer things, he tells me. I always reply with a polite, glad to hear it. Hope you're well. And I mean it. I don't miss the marriage. I just miss the years I wasted pretending I had to fit into it. As for Jessica, we haven't spoken since the court hearing. And honestly? That's probably for the best. Last month, Lisa dropped by to check out the Cuda. She ran her hand along the freshly painted fender, admiring the deep plum metallic finish that seemed to shimmer under the shop lights. You know, she said, I think this one might turn out even better than the Cobra. I smiled and wiped my hands off with a shop rag. Different goals this time, I told her. The Cobra was about proving I could do high-end restoration work. This one? This one's about getting back to why I started doing this in the first place. And how's that going? She asked. I looked over at the car. Still rough around the edges. Still a long way to go. But every inch of it was coming back to life, carefully, lovingly, purposefully. Better than I expected, I said. Turns out, when you're building something just for yourself, not to impress anyone else, it hits different. Feels better. Feels right. Lisa laughed. Sounds like you learned a lot more than how to rebuild a big block engine. Yeah. I guess I did. Sometimes, it takes someone trying to rip your dream out from under you to show you how much that dream actually means. And sometimes, the worst thing that ever happened to you ends up being the moment that set you free.